What is up? Welcome to Mock It Like It's Hot, the final mock draft of the 2025 season. We did our listener league draft live on air last week. My team crushed it. Austin ducked me on the show. We'll talk to him about that in a second once we get everything started. For our final show, I was trying to decide what I wanted to do, and most people would do something really like common and modern. I decided to go another way with it. We have not talked, I don't think, this entire season about a non-PPR league, what used to be called standard league. I don't think people really call it that much anymore. But let's talk about how a non-PPR league changes things for fantasy football. Let's get into it. What is up? Welcome to Mock It Like It's Hot, Club Fantasy's weekly mock draft show. I am your host, Ryan Weisse, with me as always, except last week, Austin Amandolia. How are you doing, my friend?
Doing pretty good. Excited to be back. I have the streak going of missing the show for our listener league, and I've got to break that next year. But at least I'm here for the last draft.
I called you out with Lewis. I said that I don't believe you are courageous enough to do drafts live. That's what it really comes down to. We've done more mock drafts together than any two human beings probably on this planet, but I don't believe that you're ready to do a real live fantasy draft.
Well, I think that's fair given all of the heck I gave you on our Wednesday night tight end show for being too much of a coward to show up as you were actively working on a salary cap draft.
Yeah, that's very true. My only standard league and my salary cap draft. So let's throw that out there. We're going to talk standard league in a second, but I have delayed way too much, as Joe Ortiz is pointing out to everyone in the chat. I am always late when it comes to starting this show. So let's at least dive in and get this league started, explain to you all the ground rules, all of that kind of fun stuff. So as I mentioned before, it is a standard league. I'm actually just going to go ahead and start this draft right now so that we can get this thing moving, though. I only have it set up for 12 rounds this time, so it's actually not going to be that tough. Non-PPR standard, we're going to talk more about that in a second. I also went old school positions, 1 quarterback, 2 running backs, 2 wide receivers, 1 flex. Very basic league. Normally a league like this would have kickers and defense. I did not include them for the mock draft because if you didn't take them until the last round, we would make fun of you anyway. That's all it really comes down to. If you've ever tuned into an episode of Mock It Like It's Hot, we do not judge every team. We're not going to tell you who the best team was at the end of this draft. We're going to talk about interesting picks and interesting things about standard leagues. But I do like to give a shout out to those folks who are drafting with us right now. A lot of you are in the chat right now. We appreciate all of you. So at the first one, or the first pick, the 101, I can't talk today. I was trying to figure out what his name is. It's No Chill. That's what I'm calling you at this point. HoovTube is picking from the 2, Geek Mill at the 3, Austin took the 4, Andrea at the 5, Duarte at the 6, going deep at the 7. Josh Hudson, who was supposed to be our guest tonight, couldn't make it. He's picking from the 8. I won't be surprised if he ends up auto picking. Bro Cal at the 9, and our good friend Caesar at the 10. That is Joe in the chat. Or no, that's not Joe in the chat. Judd, is Joe in here? I don't even think Joe's in here giving me such a hard time because he's just giving me a hard time. Didn't make the mock draft at all. So I'm clearly an idiot. Austin, let's talk standard leagues. And my first question to you is, do you even play in standard leagues? I feel like nobody plays standard non-PPR anymore.
I was going to say, when you said at the top of the show that this was a standard league, first off, that was the first time I realized this was a standard league. So I'm really glad you called that out before the draft started. And my immediate thought was, Ryan, you were such a sicko for doing this at the very last draft of the year. I think, no, I do not play in any standard leagues, which is honestly a shame that I don't, because they still exist and they are clearly a unique challenge, because I am over here just looking at the projected points for these players, and my mind is blown at how devalued wide receivers are all of a sudden. But I think the format itself still has its merits, as I'm sure you can say more about.
Yeah. So what's interesting, it's so funny, Austin, and folks, me and Austin did not talk about this draft before the show at all. Normally we talk fantasy baseball or the show schedules for the rest of the season. So we don't talk. Austin, what you just said is the exact reason we are doing this draft. It was actually something that came up in my customer service job at Football Guys this past week. So at Football Guys, like with most ranking sites, I'm letting you guys see how the sausage is made here a little bit. You input your rankings to a certain scoring setting. And with football guys, much like fantasy pros, you input it to half-point PPR. And then a computer algorithm will take and twist those rankings when a customer switches to standard. And Austin, I went to my tech guy. Hopefully I'm not sharing anything I shouldn't be sharing here, because 13 of the top 17 picks were running backs. And I said, look, this is too much. Like our algorithm is way overdoing how bad this hurts wide receivers. So that's exactly why we're doing this draft. And Austin, normally we don't talk about the first 3 rounds till they get a little bit further in, but already in practice, we're not seeing people who are like, I have to have running backs. Like, it's funny because it's such an old school way of drafting, non-PPR that is, but it also lends itself to the old school way of drafting that I still do, which is running backs early and often.
Yeah, completely. I mean, I was thinking about how I wanted to approach this, and immediately I'm like, well, I think I might just go back to when I first started playing fantasy football, and I would take running back in my first my first picks, and then figure it out later, because it is such a valuable position at that rate, because they are the most likely to get consistent yardage and to get those touchdowns. But to your point, I do think there is a temptation to take it too far, because even without the points for receptions, we know that a reception is much more valuable inherently than a rush. Right? An average catch is going to be 5 or more yards down the field. That's going to be more points than the average run, which is in that 4 to 5 yard range. And so it is easy to kind of overcorrect when you switch back into that standard format and think, oh, well, now it's just only about the running backs.
Yeah, and while you make your pick here, that's exactly kind of where I went with it, is you still have to start these wide receivers. Like the obvious one that came up was Jamar Chase. When I did my little adjustment, fell out of the top 10. And I'm like, I don't care what your scoring format is. Jamar Chase is a top 10 overall pick, unless somehow receivers only get points for touchdowns. And he still might be a top 10 overall pick at that point. Because what I was going to go at, Austin, is it's not like this is an all flex league like Scott Fishbowl or some of the charity drafts out there. Everybody has to start 2 wide receivers. So there is a positional advantage to be had at wide receiver, just like there's a positional advantage to be had at running back. You just need to make the decision on where the biggest edge is. So I will say, because of what it does for our running back scoring, where it just boosts them so far up, it should let a credence to more running backs going in the first 2 rounds. But we're seeing in this draft, that is not at all what is happening. It is, I'd venture, I guess, split down the middle at this point.
Yeah, it is split down the middle for sure. I do feel like, to your point, like in those first 5 picks, we saw more running backs than we typically would. I feel like it's kind of flipped. Like, I think typically in the first 5 picks, we'd see probably 3 receivers going, maybe 2 running backs. And here we see 2 more running backs getting pushed up into the top 5 overall. But I do think we have some sharp drafters with us tonight who are not overlooking the receivers just because they're not getting the points for the full reception.
Yeah, and I do want to give a shout out just to those folks in the chat. We saw our buddy Gator, who said he's driving right now, but wanted to stop by. He said we're going to keep him awake. So we definitely need to do that. We see a bunch of the drafters with us. Caesar's in the chat, Geek Mills in the chat, Duarte's in the chat. Joe pointed out that it was not him in the chat. I made a mistake there, or it was not him in the draft. But he did say, and this has to just, that we're his favorite show. And that's why he's here supporting us. Joe, we appreciate the hell out of that. We'll try to keep that going. This is, unfortunately, the last episode of Mock It Like It's Hot. However, folks, when the season rolls around, me and Austin don't even stop doing shows together. We push it back one day early, and the Mock It Draft show turns into the DFS show for me and Austin. So you guys will still see this exact crew every single Friday. We drop the DFS show. But then Club Fantasy, I was going to save this for the end of the show. Club Fantasy doesn't go away when the season starts. It gets way more content. So every Monday, Josh, myself, maybe Jay, are going to be doing our Monday Hangxiety. It is our recap show where we just talk about Sunday's action. Every Tuesday is going to be the waiver wire show. Every Wednesday is the flagship show, which is the weekly preview for the upcoming week. And then Thursday, we got the Sneaky Flex, the best advice show in fantasy football, 15 minutes with Rowan, Maisie, and Wendy Early, where these 2 young girls answer your questions and knock it out of the park every single time. And then Friday drops our DFS show. Saturday, start, sit, different day. The only day we take off is Sunday so that we can watch football and have more content for you guys. So starting next week, get ready. We're ready to roll into these week 1 shows. I know I missed a bunch of people in the chat. I appreciate you guys, but Austin, it is time for probably the only round by round recap that we are going to do this show, because if you guys, again, haven't tuned in, we don't talk about every pick, but I do like to talk about the first 3 rounds. And Austin, it may actually be fast enough here for me to talk about the first 4 rounds. But let's get into this. I did set this up as a 10-team league, basically because I didn't want to have to worry about filling the draft up, and it literally filled up about 5 minutes before we went on air. So that was a great call on my part. Jamar Chase kicks this draft off. Bijan Robinson, Saquon Barkley, Derrick Henry, Jahmyr Gibbs, CeeDee Lamb, Puka Nacua, Ashton Genty, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Justin Jefferson. First round, 5 receivers, 5 running backs. Moving into the second round, we start off with Christian McCaffrey, Brian Thomas Jr., Jonathan Taylor, Bucky Irving, Malik Neighbors, Josh Jacobs, Drake London, Chase Brown, Nico Collins, and Devon Achane. I think we probably need to talk about Achane because I'm starting to get a little worried about this injury, Austin. The team that took Achane goes tight end and keeps a very well-balanced team. Brock Bowers is the first pick of the 3rd round. Then we got Kyron Williams, Lad McConkey. I almost said Luke McConkey off my game tonight. Lad McConkey, A.J. Brown, Jackson Smith and Jigba, Breece Hall, Trey McBride, Omarion Hampton, James Cook, and George Kittle. We did finally start to see quarterbacks starting off in the 4th round. Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson go in 2 of the first 3 picks of the 4th round. But Austin, I wanted to talk about, let's start with these first 3 rounds and any interesting picks that you see. We kind of already spent some time on this, but again, 3 tight ends go in the 3rd round, which I think has been a major change. Let's start with that. 3 tight ends in the first 3 rounds, but again, they were all in the 3rd round, Austin. So these guys' ADPs have packed in a little bit tighter. And we talked about this a little bit on my 8-team mock. In a smaller league, getting one of these guys who gives a positional advantage is almost more valuable than it is in like a 14-team league.
Yes, completely. And I think what's interesting too about this, aside from the increased value of the tight end position in this format, it's also the fact that Brock Bowers is making it now out of the 2nd round in this format.
Yeah, that was a little wild.
That was the thing that really stuck out to me in this. You see George Kittle getting pushed up. He's been kind of like late 3rd, early 4th. I feel like I've seen him more commonly in the 4th round. And so you see him pushed up a little bit, Brock Bowers falling a little bit. And I feel like that's really the result of people feeling the extra value for the running backs, right? Yeah. Without the point per reception, I think people are drawn to, let me get the running back first, and then I can get the tight end later. And so we see him fall, but I agree with you. Getting one of those 3 guys early is going to be really crucial or really beneficial in one of these drafts, because it is so valuable to have that positional advantage at tight end, especially in these 8-10 team league formats.
Yeah, and I'm going to own my take. I watched your tight end show last night, and you kind of actually touched on this, where it seemed like they should all be grouped a little bit tighter together, and it seems like it's finally happening. McBride is kind of staying put, but Bowers maybe back a little bit. Kittle certainly up a little bit from where we saw a month ago. But I recently made a change based on Austin's favorite thing in the world, training camp hype. And I did move Trey McBride to my number 1 tight end. And I'll defend it very briefly, Austin, because you guys did talk about this last night. I'll defend it very briefly, is that I feel like there is room to grow for Trey McBride in that he led tight ends in points per game last season, and he's being drafted, at least was, almost a round after Bowers. As they get closer, the waters get a little bit muddier. But I just feel like McBride can easily repeat what he did last season with this whole new offense in Las Vegas. I don't think I can use the word easily for Brock Bowers, and I know you don't necessarily agree with that.
Yeah, I mean, I do think that's fair, and I would imagine some regression for Brock Bowers. It is like, it's one of those things where I want to see it repeated before I feel like, oh, I can count on this every year. If there's anybody I feel like I can count on it happening again, it's going to be Brock Bowers, because of the prospect he was and the performance he had in college and coming out the way he did it last year, I think was really impressive. But to your point, changing offensive schemes, there is uncertainty there. There's more uncertainty there than there is for Trey McBride, who is just in the same system. the thing that I feel like to me is the reason that McBride is a particularly interesting value pick is just the touchdown regression that should be coming his way.
Yeah.
The fact that he barely scored touchdowns last year, which is really freaking frustrating for DFS contests because he is one of my favorite cash tight ends. But
half of his touchdowns last year were rushing, and one was him falling on a ball. So.
Exactly. And he's historically had very few touchdowns. So it's going to be interesting this year. I think we'll either see that really truly regresses and he has like a 10 touchdown season, or we're going to learn, oh, he's not really going to be the touchdown threat in this team. He's going to be more of the volume eater, and somebody else, probably one of the running backs, gets the touchdowns. I think this year would be a really good case for that. But that is one reason why I'm interested in McBride as a value compared to Bowers, is that touchdown regression.
There's two more players I want to take a look at, and then I'll give you a chance to throw somebody out here if you want. We are going to talk about Jonathan Taylor. He's the thumbnail. We'll get to that right after this segment. But the two more interesting picks to me are Jahmyr Gibbs and Devon Achane. And I'm wondering if this is overthinking non-PPR, because as you pointed out, I actually wrote an article about this a few years ago, and I've double-checked the stats every year. The math still holds true. A target is more valuable than a carry, even in standard non-PPR leagues. Gibbs falls to RB4 in this one, Austin, and that's with you taking Derrick Henry ahead of him. Achane, who has been a borderline back end of the first round pick, falls all the way to 210. So do you think this is overthinking non-PPR? Do you think this is exactly how it should be? And with Achane, do you think that injury is playing into that a little bit?
Yeah, so I'll start with the Jahmyr Gibbs pick. I think I was really torn on whether to go with him or Derrick Henry at that spot, in part because I do have some concerns that Jahmyr Gibbs is not going to score as many touchdowns this year as Derrick Henry will. And that's where I'm a little bit more where I kind of get my tiebreakers in standard and half PPR format, because touchdowns can be a really big game changer, aside from what you just pointed out about carries versus targets, and targets being more valuable regardless. Jahmyr Gibbs had 20 touchdowns last year total, if you count rushing and receiving.
Yeah.
And that was with no David Montgomery for most of the season. And so that is one of the big things for me, is that we do expect to have David Montgomery back in action. And I think that cuts into Jahmyr Gibbs' touchdown production, but Derrick Henry should continue to score touchdowns the way he typically does. So for me, that was the rationale for going with Derrick Henry over Jahmyr Gibbs. I think either one, I don't think it's a wrong pick to go with Jahmyr Gibbs at the fourth pick. That was just kind of the tiebreaker for me.
Yeah, I did that standard league auction, which changes everything up because you can kind of get the guys you want to get. So I had actually got Brock Bowers for dirt cheap last year, and it's $100 budget auction. Whatever you paid them the year before, they go up by $3 in year two. So I got Brock Bowers for $3 last year and had to only pay him $6 this year, which is like half of his market value. So that really set me up to do something I haven't been able to do in this league. I figured, Austin, we talked about how we nominated in auction leagues. I nominated Christian McCaffrey when I did want him, because I figured people were going to be afraid of the injury. So I nominated him early because I didn't think people would want to spend money, because Jahmyr Gibbs was on the board and there were some other really great backs on the board. Henry was one, Jonathan Taylor was another. So I nominated McCaffrey and got him for like $6 more under market. So now all of a sudden I had all this money to play with, and I had to make the decision, Austin, between Derrick Henry and our thumbnail, Jonathan Taylor. And Austin, I'm not going to pass up Jonathan Taylor in any way, shape, or form. I love Derrick Henry and I did bid on him, but they went probably $2 or $3 higher than I wanted to, but I was not afraid to spend those $2 or $3 on Jonathan Taylor. I'm still going to give you time to talk about these first three rounds if you want, but I do want to talk about, let's get to the thumbnail for just a moment here. Jonathan Taylor, and I think we could lump Kyren Williams in with this. This format where it favors touchdown scorers and doesn't hurt non-pass catchers as much. Should we have not seen? We saw Jonathan Taylor jump up. I checked the ADP before this draft, Austin. That's a full round higher than Jonathan Taylor's ADP. Kyren Williams didn't follow that same suit. So is Jonathan Taylor appropriately priced? Do you think these two should even be lumped in together?
Yeah, I mean, I do think Jonathan Taylor is appropriately priced. And I feel like in some ways, like the sequencing of the running backs stayed pretty similar despite the scoring change. Like Jonathan Taylor, I feel like this is the range he typically goes in general. And Kyron Williams, I think people just don't. He's
Hold
not
on,
an
I'm going to
exciting
backtrack
player.
on you on that. You think this is, and I'm not saying you're wrong, because I haven't done a lot of drafts on Sleeper this year, which is odd. Most of my dynasties are on Sleeper, not my redraft leagues. Jonathan Taylor's standard ADP, because I was going to use him for the keep trade cut, was like 23. So this is like 10 picks ahead of where they're saying the ADP is. I'm not saying you're wrong, Austin. I'm just saying it's strange to me that maybe Sleeper's ADP isn't catching up with what's actually happening.
Yeah, that's fair, because I feel like to me, Jonathan Taylor going where he did in this draft does not shock me. And so maybe I'm just not up to date on my ADP numbers, but this feels like he ends up going in this range where it's kind of in that Josh Jacobs, Bucky Irving, Christian McCaffrey realm. But Kyron Williams tends to be the guy left out, because I think he's just not an interesting player to pick. I think he's just like, it's one of those things where you have a boring pick and people don't want to take the boring player.
Yeah.
And so he ends up falling in these drafts. So I think that's what's associated with it more than anything, rather than, Jonathan Taylor being overpriced and Kyron Williams underpriced. I think it's just that people are excited about Jonathan Taylor. They're not about Kyron Williams. And so I do feel like Williams ends up being a value, because to your point, like, he gets the yardage and he will likely get the touchdowns.
Yeah, Kyron Williams, and I don't use this lightly, Kyron Williams feels like a different version of Derrick Henry. We keep expecting Derrick Henry to fall apart or the team to lessen his workload. That's all we're doing with Kyron Williams every year, is finding a reason to hate him. And every year, Sean McVay's like, I'm giving this kid the ball every single time he can handle touching it. They went out and got Blake Corum last year. Blake Corum was literally looked at as a Kyron Williams clone. They didn't give him the ball. They go out and get Jarquez Hunter this year, a guy who I didn't even know about. And people are finding a reason to be worried about Kyron again. And I just don't see anything changing with the Rams.
Yeah. And I think, honestly, to me, like, Sean McVay going out and getting the Blake Corum and the Jarquez Hunters of the world is more about his love of Kyron Williams than it is about anything, because he's like, I need to have this guy. I need this type of player if and when Kyron Williams gets hurt, because we know injuries are going to happen. And so having Blake Corum there, he knows he can have that same skill set ready to go. And as the backup, whenever Williams hopefully never gets hurt, but likely will get hurt, because that's the nature of football.
Yeah, especially when you handle 80% of your team's running back touches.
Exactly.
Austin, I kind of jumped around a lot on this, but I did want to give you a chance looking at those first 30 picks. Did anything else stand out to you about these early rounds?
Well, I did want to come back to your question about Devon Achane, because
please.
I do think the injury is something to be concerned about. And it's the reason that I've been down on Achane, especially compared to one certain founder of Club Fantasy, that is Josh Hudson, who has him in like his top 3 in terms of running back rankings.
I wonder if that's going to change with this injury too, though. So,
yeah, and this has been my concern with Devon Achane. A player of his size is likely to get hurt. It's just the nature of football. It's the nature of the running back position. And so because of that, like, he feels like a risky pick to me. And with him coming into the season with the injury designation, it feels like the risk is all of that more present. And even without that, I've been a little bit hesitant to go his direction, just because I don't expect him to play 17 games. And I feel a little cautious to assume that the pass volume he got last year is going to withstand, given that there were a lot of injuries to the other pass catchers in that offense that then boosted the need for him to be involved in the pass game.
Go ahead and make your pick there real quick. And I've kind of went the other route, and this is probably a symptom of doing too many shows with Josh Hudson. I have Achane in so many leagues, and I know we don't ever talk, and Josh puts in the chat, nope, Achane to the moon. But one thing I'm doing in every Achane league, Austin, and this has been easier. This was easier about 5 days ago. I am getting Ollie Gordon with one of my last picks in almost every single draft. And I know it's like gauche to talk about players who haven't been drafted yet, but it's a mock draft. Everyone's going to be okay. I feel like, Austin, there are a few players out there where handcuffing is completely necessary. And I think none of these guys have been picked yet, but I think it's worth talking about. Ollie Gordon for Achane, because it sounds like he has just flat out beat Jalen Wright for that job, and Jalen Wright is also hurt. And then Brian Robinson going to San Francisco has tanked his value, Austin, like something I've never seen before. Every CMC manager better have Brian Robinson, to where you and I have talked about this recently about what kind of person we are. Actually, that might have been me and Lewis last week. Where are we the type of person who drafts our own handcuff, or are we the one who tries to steal other people's handcuffs? If I have Achane or McCaffrey, I'm drafting my own handcuff, plain and simple.
Yeah, and I think in a redraft setup, that is definitely a very common strategy. I will say I have seen, I'm still in a bunch of best ball drafts, got several slow drafts going, and I've also seen Brian Robinson continuing to fall in those leagues. And that is a situation where I'm probably not taking my own handcuff, because in best ball, the idea is you're drafting as if you are right. But I love, even if I don't have a single San Francisco player on my team, if I don't have their correlated week 17 matchup, I am like, I don't care. Brian Robinson falling, and if he ends up taking over, if McCaffrey does get hurt, Brian Robinson could end up being like a milli making winning player in those best ball formats where he could have so much upside down the stretch. So I love that his ADP has fallen, and I'm very much with you on making sure to snag him if you have that, if you have a McCaffrey built to lineup, because also like Brian Robinson getting traded isn't anything. It doesn't say anything about Brian Robinson as a player. Like, he's a solid running back. He was doing well in Washington. It was not that he left because he wasn't successful. So he's going to be totally fine especially if McCaffrey gets hurt and he needs to play a larger role.
100%. And that's exactly where I am. I think best ball Brian Robinson is just a lock, especially on a team that is going to be in the red zone a lot and is going to need to score touchdowns. That's the perfect time. This sucks for McCaffrey managers. That's the perfect time to take Christian McCaffrey out of the game and bring Brian Robinson in. It's the one thing he seems to be really good at. I want to wrap this part of the conversation up with Ollie Gordon. I don't remember your pre-draft take on Ollie Gordon. He's a guy I love because of the whole thing where he would have been the RB1 if he came out a year before. Obviously, that year of college didn't do him any favors. But Austin, I also am prone to this mistake. And folks, the draft is about to go off the screen. I'm going to leave it up here for a little bit just so you guys can take in the first half of the draft. We are still going to talk a lot more about this half of the draft. But Austin, I am prone to falling in love with these players based on what could have happened if they had come out a year early. And I gave myself Isaiah Spiller vibes when it came to Ollie Gordon, because everyone knows how much I was into Isaiah Spiller and everyone knows how much that blew up in my face. Well, what's your take on Ollie Gordon before we move on here, Austin?
Yeah. I was very low on him. Well, not very low, I would say. I had him ranked as my 15th rookie running back coming out. And for reference, that's just behind Woody Marks and Jarquez Hunter and Jordan James that were above him. I remember, I have my notes from it. The thing that I remember from watching his tape is that it does feel like it takes him a second to like get going in terms of getting like to his full level of burst. And so to me, if he is being utilized in shotgun formations a lot, I'm worried about his ability to get upfield, because it feels like it just takes him a second to get that speed going. But if he's being used in more under center packages where he's able to kind of get that speed going, I feel like then to me, he seems like someone that has that explosiveness and can break big plays, that he's an interesting player within that dynamic. And so I that's kind of how I'm approaching it when it comes to him. So having him late in a draft, like, I don't mind that. It really to me depends on like who is still available on the board at that point. But at this point, like, I think it's worth it because, he could be the week 1 starter at this point.
And that's what they're saying. Week 1 and week 2 could be Ollie Gordon time. And then it's not going to happen. But if Ollie Gordon comes out and actually balls like we've seen rookie running backs do, then all of a sudden we're talking about a fucking timeshare in Miami breaking Josh and Junior Brown's heart. Junior Brown said his FSB team needs Devon Achane. Jamie, how's it going, friend? Good to see you. But yeah, I think that's super interesting. Kyle, I see your question. Bear with us just a few moments. We'll get that up on the screen here in just a little bit. Austin, where I wanted to go with this actually perfectly leads into what kind of happened next in the draft. And that is no quarterbacks go till the 4th round, which we all know does not happen in home leagues. Proud of you guys. It's not going to happen that way. But Austin, I actually wanted to go with another hypothetical in this because this is not something you can put in sleeper. But when you talk about these standard leagues, I think another rule that kind of goes hand in hand with these is the 4-point passing touchdown, a rule that I never understood. Touchdowns are worth 6 points. But I kind of just wanted to talk a little bit about 4-point passing touchdowns. Do you play in any leagues with 4-point passing? And I guess if you do or don't, could you talk about what that does for rushing quarterbacks? Because I think it starts to change the landscape a little bit when it comes to rushing quarterbacks.
Yes, I primarily play in 4-point passing touchdown leagues.
I play in none, Austin. Oh, no, one. I play in one. That's wild.
Yeah, I mean, I honestly like the whole 6-point passing touchdown thing was not a thing for me until I got into fantasy content and started joining like industry leagues and whatnot. So I would take that back. There was one time on Yahoo when I was first playing that it was 6-point passing touchdown. But other than that, it was always 4 because that was ESPN's standard format. And still a lot of my leagues skew that way. And I think to your point, it does really increase and enhance the value of these rushing quarterbacks. So my home league is 4-point passing touchdown. It's a super flex league. I have Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson. It is beautiful. Like I am super set in that league at quarterback for years to come. In large part because of the value that they bring with their legs and getting those rushing touchdowns. Yeah.
You don't realize how quickly 2 points adds up when you get these guys who can score a lot of rushing touchdowns. In a 4-point league, Jalen Hurts has to be borderline a QB1 because he's been one of the few guys who has proven he can score double-digit rushing touchdowns every season. And if he hits 10, that's 60 points. That's 15 touchdown passes. Well, guess what? He's also going to throw those 15 touchdown passes, probably more than that. We hope more than that, right, Josh? To where it just gives him such an advantage over like a 20 touchdown pass thrower. And let's be honest, the NFL right now, the Austin, is a lot of fucking 20 touchdown pass throwers. So
yeah, exactly. I mean, I agree. Jalen Hurts, he was somebody that I was like kind of eyeballing in this league, seeing where he was going to go in this draft. And if he had made it to my 5th round pick, I probably was going to take him there. So, it was interesting to see that he went before then. And I think it is because of what you just said. Like he does have that consistent rushing or touchdown ability. The tush push still legal play. So he's going to still have that as an option to score those touchdowns consistently. And to me, like it honestly, it calls out the fact that Joe Burrow goes right after him in this draft because Joe Burrow does not have that same level of rushing upside. And I would argue should be going later in this draft.
That's exactly where I was going to go with this, Austin, is I don't think we need to discuss Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson at 4-1 and 4-3, other than that might be a value, which is crazy to say that drafting those two as the first 2 quarterbacks was still a value because we just don't see that very often. And then when you look at some of the guys, I'm going to make some enemies here, but in a non-PPR league, when you look at some of the guys who went ahead of them, Jackson Smith and Jigba and Ladd McConkey come to mind. I think I would way rather have Lamar Jackson than Jackson Smith and Jigba and Ladd McConkey, just who I am as a person. But then what I find interesting is it's a 1-round break and then everybody grabs on the next elite quarterbacks. And you and I have been having a lot of discussion lately to where we think maybe Revenge Tour, and Josh is part of this too, Revenge Tour Patrick Mahomes should be a little bit closer to that group, but certainly closer to Joe Burrow. And you mentioned you thought Burrow should maybe fall away from this group a little bit.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I feel like Patrick Mahomes, he is going at a value right now in almost every format, and I am super prepared for the Revenge Tour. People forget that like he was a legit court QB1 2 times without having the ridiculous rushing upside that some of these other guys have, like Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen. He had 3 consecutive seasons as a top 5 quarterback from 2020 to 2022. And it so happened that in 23 and 24, it regressed a little bit. And that's partially because of the way defenses played him, but that also aligns with them having less talent around him at the receiver position and for his skill players. And so this year, he's going to miss some time with Rashee Rice, but he's going to have Travis Kelce in better shape. He's going to have Xavier Worthy. Hollywood Brown is going to be there from the get-go. Isaiah Pacheco is healthy. Like the offensive ecosystem is going to be healthier overall, and I could see Patrick Mahomes really standing out. And so to me, like if Joe Burrow is going in the 5th round, like Patrick Mahomes should be as well. Like they should be going at about the same time, in my opinion.
Yep, I'm with you on that wholeheartedly. It was last week where I was talking about this with Lewis, but I talked about it with you on the quarterback show. Is I had this epiphany recently, and let me be clear: this does not go for 4-point touchdown leagues. That's what this chapter is going to be called on the YouTube show. This does not go for 4-pointers. I want to be very clear. But I had this epiphany that Hurts was the first quarterback of tier 2 for me. He was not the 4th quarterback of tier 1. And I made that tier Hurts, Burrow, and Mahomes in a 6-point touchdown league. Again, want to be very clear there. Hurts and Allen are tier 1, maybe with Daniels, but probably by themselves, because even Jackson doesn't quite score the rushing touchdowns. He gets all the yards, but he only scores like 5 touchdowns a year. So that's, again, that's neither here nor there. That's not what we're going to talk about, but I agree with everything you're saying there. I want to throw Kyle up on the screen before we move on to the mid-round recap here, Austin. He drops his keepers for us, and his keepers have already an interesting question for me. So he's keeping Josh Allen, Bucky Irving, Tony Pollard, Xavier Worthy, and Rashee Rice, what we will be talking about, George Pickens, and Jacoby Myers. Because of having 7 keepers, he does not pick again until pick 58. We'll talk about the players he's interested in, but let's start with, Austin, if you were in a spot to keep both of these Kansas City wide receivers, and I'm going to go with the assumption that his first pick would be earlier if he didn't keep both of these wide receivers. Would you keep both? It just feels weird to me. Are you going to feel comfortable starting both Kansas City wide receivers at any point this season?
I'm probably not going to feel comfortable starting both at the same time. The one thing I will say is I think there could be some potential trade bait, and also it also depends a little bit on the overall, like the roster that we're working with. You know, like if there are other players of higher caliber than either Xavier Worthy or Rice, then I start to question it more. So it's a little bit hard to like make a call without seeing the overall roster that we're picking from for those keepers. But I do think even with that, I would be unlikely to start both of them because I think they will eat into each other's workload, I suspect. And I also think that once Rice is back and it's fully up to speed, he's going to be the volume receiver or start working his way into the volume receiver role. And Xavier Worthy is going to really start to focus on that stretch to the field player. I mean, that's what we saw at the beginning of last year. And so I think because of that, it's also like Worthy's going to be boom bust all season long or after Rice comes back, and Rashee Rice is going to be the more steady player. So maybe the way you play this is Worthy has a solid, first 4 to 6 weeks of the year, because I think when we saw Rice out of the lineup, Worthy had more volume. He was, especially down the stretch, he started to have like a lot of volume and was able to have some consistent performances. And so maybe you play into that and set yourself up to trade away Worthy just before Rashee Rice comes back and kind of sell high in that way.
Yeah, I think that's not a bad idea at all. He lists the players he has his eyes on for the rest of the draft. And based on how he has these listed, I'm guessing he thinks he's going to be able to get these guys consecutively. And I'm going to burst his bubble a little bit based on my recent drafts. But he has DeAndre Swift, Calvin Ridley, and Bill Croskey-Merritt, 3 guys that I adore. Keon Coleman, I wanted to love last year. I'm kind of off on him this year. Ollie Gordon and Isaac Tesla. But what I'm seeing, Austin, those first 3 guys he has listed, they are all creeping into the 5th and 6th round together. For a lot of my drafts, I have had to choose between Ridley and Swift, who you and I have had our battles all offseason on my love for DeAndre Swift. But I think it really raises his question of, should he focus on running back or wide receiver? He's obviously keeping 4 wide receivers, so common sense feels like running back, but one of his wide receivers isn't playing until week 7, so it makes it a little harder.
Yeah, I mean, I think I would be more likely. I mean, at this point, let's see, you have Bucky Irving and Tony Pollard. It depends. It really depends on what other running backs you have available. I think if there's not a, if there's a running back that essentially I have ranked below Tony Pollard, then I'm probably just going to keep my receivers and try and find a late round running back that I think can have some upside. Now, if there is somebody like an Isaiah Pacheco on your roster, if you have like a James Conner, I would rather have James Conner than both of the Kansas City receivers. And I will say, it might not be the worst thing in the world if you do miss out on DeAndre Swift in your draft, because I'm starting to hear more hype for Kyle Monangai. And the thing that I'm truly, and it's not just like, oh, he's going to like outshine DeAndre Swift. It's that it seems like the coaching staff is wanting to focus on having Monangai be the innings eater, which I'm getting this content from Robert Mays, this insight from him, who is going around two camp visits, and they want to use him as the guy that's like eating up those touches, and DeAndre Swift can then be more of a burst guy. So I do worry about the volume for DeAndre Swift. So if you do miss out on him, may not be the worst thing in the world.
Yeah. Millie, give us a second. I will. We'll talk about the team you just drafted in just a moment. But Austin, I did want to give you a chance here in this middle. The draft is over. It was only a 12-round draft. Thank you guys so much for drafting with us, and thanks for those who are sticking around to watch the show. Austin, I have scrolled so that round 3 is up there. We've already talked about round 3. So starting with round 4, do any other picks stand out to you? I love that little ladder motion we have of tight ends. So it seems like they all went around in a pick late from each other after they started going. But Austin, me and you've kind of went back and forth on this summer too. I don't know how I feel about TJ Hawkinson being the one to lead that group out of Laporta, Travis Kelce, Hawkinson, like Ingram, Andrews. For me, it's not TJ Hawkinson.
Well, Laporta did go before Hawkinson because
I'm looking at the little screen right now. Okay, gotcha.
No, you're good.
I didn't even realize you took Hawkinson. Didn't mean to shit on your team here, though I often do. So. No,
it's all good. Well, it's funny because when you started talking about this, I was like looking at the draft. I was like, wow, I took Hawkinson and Travis Kelce was still on the board.
Okay,
what happened there? But it's because Sam Laporta went, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna get Sam Laporta here with my 6th pick. Because I want to go ahead and get a tight end that I think is going to be able to have reasonable volume. And then he got taken. So I was like, okay, well, TJ Hawkinson's next by ADP, so let me just go ahead and snag him. If I was actually drafting and not talking at the same time, I probably would have paused for a second to be like, oh, let me actually take Travis Kelce because that's who I prefer between these two tight ends. I do think Hawkinson, I agree that I think he should be ranked below both Laporta and Kelce, but he is a totally fine consolation prize for me, and I feel like he can have the upside. The issue is that he may not be the one. He's got a lot of competition for touchdowns in Minnesota, whereas Travis Kelce is typically the red zone target for Patrick Mahomes, and so will likely perform better in standard scoring because of that and the touchdown upside that comes with Travis Kelce.
When you look at these rounds, and Austin, feel free to talk about any of the draft because we're probably not going to do a late round recap on a 12-round draft. So when you look from rounds 4 to 12, before we start getting into my keep, trade, cut question and everything else we want to do here as we end the show, do any of these other picks stand out to you?
I think the thing that stands out to me is that Matthew Golden goes ahead of Jameson Williams. That one caught my eye because I'm like, Jameson Williams, he was pretty good last year, and I feel like he has that big explosive playability. He finished as a top 24 receiver last year by fantasy points. He had 1,000 receiving yards, 7 touchdowns. Those are pretty meaningful numbers for standard scoring. And so to see him going after Matthew Golden, who is in a really crowded Green Bay receiving room, is surprising to me.
I find it interesting here. Let me actually go over to the draft so I can highlight it. Teteroa McMillan, Matthew Golden, Jameson Williams, Travis Hunter, and Mika Egbuka. We went very young and all of the rookie wide receivers at the 7-8 turn. So let's just focus on that a little bit, Austin. Obviously, you have your hesitations with this Carolina offense, as do I now after reading their training camp reports and writing their training camp reports. Is McMillan still your rookie one?
Ooh, probably not, actually. That's an interesting question. I don't know that I have them ranked that way. in actuality, which maybe it's just me being a coward and I need to fix it. But I do think I would rather of these 5 players. Well, let's just focus on the 4 rookies because I feel like
Yeah.
Jameson Williams and one of these
Yeah,
rookies is a
I
little
just
bit
threw him
of
in
a,
there because he's still young. So
and it's a little bit of a toss up to me. Like I could make a case either way, but of the 4 rookies there, I prefer Emeka Egbuka. I think he's
I
got
thought
an
that might be it
interesting
now.
chance to be very
You liked him a lot
involved
at the
early.
draft, if I remember correctly, as well.
Yes, I did. I mean, he it's one of those things where he was on this Ohio State team where it's like you get overshadowed because they had Marvin Harrison, they had Chris Olave, they had Garrett Wilson, but he was there and
Yeah,
he
his
was
freshman year, he was like the best of that group when the good people were still there. So
yes, and I had him as my third receiver in this rookie class, behind Travis Hunter and Tedera McMillan, because I feel like as a receiver, Travis Hunter was the number one for
yeah,
me. But of these 4, like I still like the situation, the landing spot really means a lot to me. Like Egbuka landing in Tampa Bay with Chris Godwin, he's not going to start the season. It's going to give Egbuka an opportunity to get involved earlier in the year. And I feel like even when Chris Godwin comes back, he will still maintain a solid role because he is that type of player. Like I think he is going to make big plays. He's going to make the important catches and will be able to sustain a role. So I kind of prefer him, especially because he's going after all of these other rookies.
and the last question I want to ask you in this mid-round recap before we move on to keep trade cut and then talk about your draft strategy for this draft, because I didn't, you weren't on the show last week, so I didn't get a chance to ask you about this. How do you handle the do not draft players, the suspended players right now? And I'm going to throw the names out you, the 4 names that everyone needs to kind of have questions about. And again, I always say this when we bring up Quinshon Judkins. I do not expect you to talk about Quinshon Judkins, the person, or Quinshon Judkins, the legal case, just in fantasy football. Joe Mixon, Quinshon Judkins, Rashee Rice, and Jordan Addison. And I find it hilarious that they all went almost next to each other in this draft. Addison and Rice, literally, let me make sure I'm highlighting the right thing here. Addison and Rice go 8-8 and 8-7. Mixon at 9-3. Judkins did fall to the 10-10. But you personally, Austin, if someone's asking you for advice, how do you handle these guys who you know are going to miss time?
Yeah. So you keep bringing up players that I drafted because I did draft Jordan Addison.
Oh, there you go. Again, yeah, like I said, I typically am staring at the picks, rarely staring at the team.
Yeah. No, you're good. It's funny how it's working out tonight. I mean, at a high level, it's truly on a case by case basis is how I handle it. For a player like Jordan Addison, he's missing 3 games. I'm like 3 games I can wait on, and I think he's going to be very involved. He's not coming off of an injury, and that's a huge aspect of this. Rashee Rice, it being 6 games, I'm like, I might have to drop him at some point, anyways. And so, like, I'm a little bit more willing to not draft him or just wait until he falls to a ridiculous level. And with him, it's like compounded, right? Because he's missing 6 games and he's coming off of a significant injury. And he's already been active in camp, so like that helps alleviate the concerns. But we still haven't seen him at full game speed yet, so I want to be mindful of that. So he falls. I feel more comfortable with Addison than I do Rashee Rice. Joe Mixon, I'm just not touching right now because I can't. It's too uncertain to me. And you see, like as I'm going through these players, it's increasing levels of uncertainty with each of them, all the way down to Judkins, who I'm like. Last time I checked, he's still not signed by the Cleveland Browns. And if you don't have a contract, you're not a draftable player for me. Brian, by the way, you're on mute. Or your mic's unplugged or something. So for me, like it just depends.
How in the world did that happen?
There we go. You're back now. So for me, it's just all about that risk management. And to me, like Addison is the lowest risk of these 4. So I see him coming off the board first.
Austin, I am shocked that we are answering this question on August 29th, but Caesar has a rookie draft tomorrow and wants to know what we're doing with Judkins in a rookie draft. If you need a couple seconds to grab your rookie rankings. What's funny is I actually had ours up earlier in the show. Now I have to go pull them up again. But Austin, in a rookie draft, you have to think the kid's career is probably going to start. When he finished, he was our 9th overall player. But Austin, you were dragging him down. You had him at 19th the last time you updated your rookie rankings.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I can't do it. Like it's so hard for me to like want to like draft him right now because he doesn't have that contract. And I think that I honestly feel like even if he does sign with Cleveland, like I could see Dylan Sampson like already having his foot in the door and having it
Yeah.
propped open and ready to roll. Now, the downside of Dylan Sampson is he is a smaller body running back. And so everything I said about Devon Achane also applies to him.
Yeah.
He might have some endurance challenges down the road, but I really liked him during the draft process as well.
I did too.
Sampson, he's a hard player to kind of scout because Tennessee's offense is so freaking weird that
Yeah.
it's like, how does this translate to the NFL?
It doesn't.
Um,
Ask Hendon Hooker, recently released.
exactly. Very, very fair. But he was still explosive, and he would get outside the tackles and show some explosiveness. So to me, I'm like, I still am kind of interested in his potential to like take over that role, whether or not Quinton
Interesting.
Judkins signs. So to me, like Judkins, like he really falls into the like to those late picks where I'm like looking at the types of guys as like Trevor Etienne that I think could have a potential starting role in the future. Jordan James, Sharkus Hunter, like that's where I'm like, maybe I start to take Quinton
Wow.
Judkins, but like I don't feel comfortable taking
Well, I was gonna
him.
say we both know he's not falling to that, so you're just never making that decision.
Exactly. Yeah.
So just really quick, Caesar dropped his 3 picks. You're clearly not taking him at 110 or 25, but
No,
3-6 maybe, or is that
maybe.
still okay?
That's where I would consider it, but definitely not with the 110 or 25.
Yeah, I would have said maybe the 2-5, but oh man, I feel like there's probably better players at the 2-5. Austin, my keep trade cut coincidentally happened to be rookie running backs, and I didn't get a chance to see how close they all went to each other. So I'll ask the question and then we'll go. But I really wanted to think about it in this format, Austin, because one of them seems to be the better value in this format. So I want you to talk about these rookie running backs that were all mid-round picks. Travian Henderson, RJ Harvey, and Caleb Johnson. And it's pretty obvious Caleb Johnson fits the non-PPR mold, but we both know that that might mean different things for different people. So talk to me about the rookie running backs, Travian Henderson, RJ Harvey, and Caleb Johnson, rookie running backs, keep trade cut in non-PPR scoring.
That's really hard because I don't know if you realize this, but you're making me pick between like 3 of my favorite running backs in this class. They
Well, I
were
remember you were never a big Hampton guy, so it kind of makes sense because you actually in one of your drafts said you are in one of our drafts you were taking Caleb Johnson over Amari and Hampton. So
yes, I had these guys listed as 2, 3, 4, only behind Ashton Genty in my rookie rankings back when we were doing those. I think I'm going to keep Travion Henderson because I think that his role is going to be solid and he's going to be able to do damage in both the rushing and the receiving game and score touchdowns in both. I think I'm gonna trade RJ Harvey because I think he has more hype and trade value. And it breaks my heart, but as a result, that means I am cutting Caleb Johnson, who, to be clear, I absolutely love and would also love to keep. But because this is the game, I will keep Travion Henderson, cut Caleb Johnson, and trade away RJ Harvey.
I'm going to go our old way of playing this game, Austin. I would trade Henderson because of these 3, there is no more hype than there is for Travian Henderson right now. So I will take in all of the riches from trading Travian Henderson. I'm going to keep Caleb Johnson because I'll take the 225 pound, 235 pound short yardage back. And I'm going to cut RJ Harvey. I know that breaks Vince Mapstone if he's in the chat. That's going to break his heart that I'm cutting the Harvmeister. But yeah, RJ Harvey's not doing it for me, Austin. The more reports I read, the more J.K. Dobbins I read. Obviously in Dynasty, Harvey has the value. But for this non-PPR redraft, I'll keep Caleb Johnson. I will trade Travian Henderson, and I will release one RJ Harvey. Austin, I want to knock out the user questions or the listener questions before I have you do your draft recap. And I'll remind everybody, because I'm a terrible host, be like Kyle, subscribe, drop comments on this video. Do you guys still play in non-PPR leagues? Do you want to see more non-PPR comment? Drop the links in the description. The 8-team mock draft, you guys commented on that video more than any of our videos ever. And guess what? It got you more 8-team content. If you want more non-PPR content, drop those comments. Austin, we got a couple of things. Our good friend Millie Mills just finished up a draft, 16-man draft, which we are going to do a 16-man mock draft next year. We're not going to fill it for shit because I can't fill 10-team mock drafts right now, but that's another problem. 6th overall pick, Jahmyr Gibbs, Kenneth Walker, Zach Charbonnet with the handcuff, Jalen Warren, Mike Evans, Cortland Sutton, Emeka Egbuka, Michael Pittman, Michael Penix, Jake Ferguson, Jaden Higgins, and Cedric Tillman. I got to say, Austin, for a 16-man, that starting lineup is filthy.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of this. Getting Gibbs and Kenneth Walker is
sneaky. And then cuffing Walker with Sharbs is crazy. Like, that's perfect drafting right there. So
yeah, and then still getting Mike Evans, Cortland Sutton, Emeka Egbuka, Michael Pittman, like those 4 I feel really great about. And it being PPR, like I'm low-key intrigued about Michael Pittman becoming old Michael Pittman and Josh Downs kind of fading with having Daniel Jones be the lead, being the quarterback in this offense, seeing the elder statesman kind of connection there. Like these guys are like both younger than me still, but regardless, I could see there being kind of a shift in Indianapolis. So I like going with Pittman there. And then, of course, you're playing to the host. So, like, yeah, love the Michael Penix love.
Well, and Millie's a big Atlanta guy, too. So I was going to make a joke that we're not going to give Millie a hard time on the Michael Penix because he is an Atlanta fan. I wasn't even thinking that, that Austin's not going to give him a hard time anyway. So
yeah, but I also love it because like in this format, like in a 16 team, especially, like you're able to like build this incredible roster and then like still get a pretty solid quarterback option. Like I think Penix can be a pretty stable quarterback in these deep league formats, and getting the depth at all the other positions you're able to is really impressive. And honestly, like even Jake Ferguson as your tight end, like I feel like in a 16-man,
super underrated.
Yeah, like in a 16-man league, like you really do want one of those elite tight ends because it's going to be such a game changer for you most of the time. But coming over Jake Ferguson, like that's totally fine.
I'm actually drafting my only 16-man tomorrow, actually at 6:00. But that one also has IDP. And it's the Travis Hunter cheat code. So I have to decide when I want to take Travis Hunter in that league. So I've been like messing around with Yahoo mock drafts because that happens to be on Yahoo. So I need to see where Hunter kind of normally goes to see where I'm going to need to sneak him so that I can start a wide receiver at corner. My one suggestion to this team, Austin, would be I think he needs a backup quarterback. I know we want to like Michael Penix, but in a 16 team, waivers can dry up quick. So if there is a starting quarterback out there, my only question to you before we move on, Austin, is would you cut the rookie Higgins or would you cut Cedric Tillman to grab that backup?
I'd probably cut Higgins just because I'm not really excited about the Houston Texans this year. Like I've been like very low on drafting their receivers in general. I feel a little bit nervous about that offensive line situation still. Like we need to see them have a stable offensive line for the offense to function. So I'm a little worried about how things are shaping up in Houston. Cedric Tillman, we saw get a ton of volume last year, and you have Joe Flacco starting out as the quarterback there. So because of that, I'd be a little bit interested in keeping Tillman over Higgins.
Kyle wants to know our thoughts on Austin Eckler. I think I like him more than most people do, but I always like pass catching running backs, Austin. I also am a huge Bill Croskey-Merritt guy, so I end up where I value both of those guys too high, and I definitely don't want both of them on my team. But for me, if I don't get Bill, I'm not mad that I got Austin Eckler.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely feel that way. And there were times where Austin Eckler was performing pretty well last year, even with Brian Robinson there. So he can still have some pop games here and there, despite the competition in the backfield. The issue is I'm not excited to start Austin Eckler.
Yeah, that's fair.
Every week. I don't want him to necessarily be my RB2, but if I need to fill him in for a bye week, like that's a totally fine route to go.
Yep. And then Millie just asked what happened to Christian Watson. If I remember correctly, it was an ACL last year, right? That he's still recovering from a injury to last year.
Yeah, I mean, and he's like I saw there being some commentary back and forth in the chat, and he is often hurt just in general, which is like kind of the way that he has progressed through the league. But yeah, he is still recovering from that torn ACL. Will miss some time early on, so I think he's not really going drafted often in fantasy leagues, and I feel like even if even if he were healthy, I wouldn't be too excited to be drafting him.
Yep. I think that's pretty much been the story of Christian Watson as an NFL and fantasy asset. Though I will say Joel, who was down on Watson, has recently went back up on Watson. So apparently the recovery news, Joel, a big Green Bay Packers fan, the recovery news has been good. Austin, you know the deal at this point. Let's wrap this show up with your final draft recap of the year. Finding out it was non-PPR literally moments before you were ready to make your first pick. You clearly didn't come into this with a strategy, but how did things go? Did you have to pivot on the slide or anything, or how'd it go for you?
Yeah, I mean, overall, I feel pretty happy with how things went. Although I do wish I had gotten Travis Kelce instead of TJ Hawkinson, as we mentioned earlier. But I would say that for the first 5 rounds, I was really focused on being careful about not overreacting and just forcing running back picks, even if it was a running back I didn't really love, and instead making sure that I was still properly valuing the wide receivers where they were at. So I did take Derrick Henry with that first pick. We talked about that, taking him over Jahmyr Gibbs. But then when it came around to my second round pick, I was trying to decide, do I go with Nico Collins, who's still on the board? Do I take Jake London, or do I take a running back? And honestly, I didn't feel super strongly about any of the running backs that were there by ADP. And so I wanted to wait and see where the running backs ended up falling. By the time I got to the 4th round, I got my second running back in Chuba Hubbard. I do feel like I ended up having to reach a little bit to get to Chuba Hubbard, but then getting James Conner as well. So I now have 3 running backs that I can start in any given week. I feel really good about those 3 running backs. Like, I can either start 2 of them in any given week, or I can put one in my flex and always have 3 running backs. And these are 3 guys that I feel like are all going to be utilized pretty consistently and able to score touchdowns pretty regularly. So feel good about that. And then later in the draft, getting Brian Robinson as that, handcuff option, that potential upside if like a Christian McCaffrey gets hurt. And I mostly just focused on, with the receivers, just getting guys that I feel like are going to score touchdowns and get a ton of yards, and not reaching too highly on those guys. The last thing I'll say is I did try and see how long I could wait for a quarterback.
Yeah.
I could have waited longer.
Yeah, clearly. I just noticed who took Tyler Shug. He just can't quit.
It just can't stop, even though he's not going to be the starter. But basically what happened for me is I was in the 10th round. I was like, well, like, I'm going to get a quarterback that I like at this point. It's going to be Bo Nix, Jared Goff, or like a Brock Purdy, or maybe a Dak Prescott. Like, there were several options available to me. I literally took Bo Nix there because I was like, there's no one else in the draft right now at ADP that I am like excited to draft. And so I was like, I'll just go ahead and snag the quarterback now, so I don't have to worry about it, and see when we get a little bit later what players are there. So I don't feel like I didn't want to overreach on a player at that point, because I felt like I wanted to be cute and wait on quarterback. So I took Bo Nix at the 10th, but I really didn't need to. Like, I could have gotten Jared Goff, Brock Purdy, etc. later on.
I need to end this with one point. We started the show to help people learn through mock drafting. And Austin, there is a lesson to learn. If anybody was watching my eyes while you were talking, I was scrambling up and down this draft board because I thought it could not be true. Austin, Bill Croskey-Merritt did not even get drafted. And I think that has everything to do with sleeper ADP not having caught up with what is happening in the real world. So let's end this, Austin. I like this kid a lot. I like him as a 6th to 7th round RB3. He should certainly be being drafted in every league format based on the role he's going to have in Washington. Do you like this kid as much as I do, Austin?
I don't think I've gotten in on the hype train as much as everybody else has, but I do know that he is the RB1 in Washington now. And so that's a reason I like him. And I am surprised he did not go in this draft. He is quickly making his way up the best ball ADP in particular, which is where I've been doing most of my drafts recently. So, probably the time to have gotten him was, in like July, August, but when nobody was thinking about him.
I don't think I have him in it. I probably have him in 1 or 2 of my best ball. I have done no best ball in August, so my teams are old.
Yeah, but no, I think it's definitely worth the hype. And, he has clearly shown the skill set to give Washington the faith that they can trade away Brian Robinson.
Yeah. But the lesson I wanted folks to learn about this is there are certain players that ADP hasn't caught up, and I have this draft tomorrow. Those players need to be in your queue so that they're constantly on your mind. So like when you hit the 9th round, like Austin did, and you're like, there are no players I want here at ADP. I'm guessing Austin probably would have took Bill where he took Knicks, knowing that he could still get his quarterback in the next round. But again, the ADP wasn't there. This is a mock draft. Austin has 1 minute and he has to talk. I'm not blaming Austin. I'm just saying some wild shit can happen in mock drafts, but they can happen in your real draft too. So make sure you guys use that tip. Use your queue. Use your queue for players you don't want to forget. I think that's the most important thing. And like Caesar said, he drafted Eckler over Bill, and that is why we mock. Guys, that brings this season of Mock It Like It's Hot to an end. That is the 2025 mock draft season. We are on to week 1. Austin, let folks know where they can find you during the regular season here at Club Fantasy.
Yeah, I mean, primarily you can find us in our user Discord, which you can join by clicking on the link in the show description. And you can find me every week for DFS Academy, where we will be talking, Ryan and I will be talking about DFS lineups. You can also find me talking to Josh on our Oh Captain, My Captain show, which is our Thursday night football DFS showdown slate show. We're going to try and do some more showdown slate shows this year as well, maybe do some Sunday and Monday night episodes. So be on the lookout for those. But also, even if we don't do those extra episodes, if you're in that Discord, we will talk about our drafts, and you can drop any team, any DFS team you come up with. We'll talk about it. We'll give advice on what we think and what we think about the team. It's what we do already with each other, and now we're just bringing our listeners and our subscribers into that as well.
Yeah, I got nothing to add. Join the Discord. Make sure you guys like and subscribe on YouTube. I mentioned at the beginning of the show, I'm going to give you one more quick rundown before we get out of here. Every Monday is Hangxiety. It's me, Josh, and possibly Gator J. We are going to be recapping all of Sunday's action. Every Tuesday is the Waiver Wire show. Because of the interest we've had recently in 8-team and smaller leagues, we're actually changing the show sheet so we can focus on some of these smaller leagues and then end the show with some of the humongous leagues that are out there as well. Every Wednesday is No Punt Intended. That is our flagship show. That is where we shift into the following week instead of talking about the last week. So it'll be the upcoming preview. That's where you're going to first hear my streams of the week before the article comes out. Every Thursday is the Sneaky Flex with Rowan and Maisie. Every Friday is the DFS show. Every Saturday is Start, Sit, Different Day. We only take Sundays off so we can watch football and bring you guys more content. Thank you so much for tuning in this season. For the last time, always remember, defense wins championships, offense wins fantasy football, and practice makes perfect. Good luck on your last drafts. We'll see you guys next summer.